Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're looking at two completely different ways of making sense of the world. I mean, radically different. It sounds a little insulting, right? But what if it's true? See, when the late Professor Hans Rosling gave people quizzes on just basic global facts, he found something shocking. Chimpanzees, literally just picking answers at random, scored better than most humans. So it's not just that we're ignorant, we're systematically actively wrong. So how can that be? Why are we so consistently off the mark? And this isn't about failing a pop quiz, This is about a fundamental misunderstanding of how the world actually works. And that leads to some pretty bad decisions in our own lives, in business, and definitely in politics. Get this. A big survey across 14 different countries asked some basic questions about global trends. A stunning 15% of people got every single question wrong. Think about that for a second. That's worse than just guessing. You would have literally gotten a better score just by flipping a coin. And this isn't about being smart or educated. We're talking Nobel Prize winners, top-tier medical researchers, global leaders. They also get it wrong. So the real question, the one we're diving into, is why? Is it just a glitch in our brains, something we're naturally wired for? Or is our misunderstanding being engineered by design? Okay, let's dig into that first idea, what we'll call Lens 1. It comes from the book Factfulness, and it argues that this whole mess isn't some conspiracy. The problem is us. It's our own psychology. Our brains are hardwired with these natural instincts that frankly create a super distorted and overly dramatic picture of reality. On one hand, you have the overdramatic view. It's the one we see all the time. The world is divided into rich and poor, things are bad, and they're only getting worse. But the fact-based worldview, the one backed by data, tells a completely different story. It shows a world where the vast majority of people are somewhere in the middle. And yeah, there are enormous challenges, but the quiet underlying trend is actually one of slow and steady progress. Now, to get to that fact-based view, you gotta have the right tools. And that old model of a developed world versus a developing world, it's basically useless today. It just doesn't work. So Factfulness suggests a new framework, looking at the world through 4 income levels, all based on how much a person earns per day. Let's just walk through it real quick. Level 1, that's extreme poverty, living on less than $2 a day, a daily struggle. On level 2, you're earning up to $8. You can buy shoes, maybe a bicycle. Then you get to level 3, up to $32 a day. Now you've got running water and maybe a motorbike. And if you're watching this explainer, you are almost certainly on level 4, earning more than $32 a day. When you see it this way, it's not a giant gap between us and them. It's a ladder, one that people are climbing, step by step. This quote from Hans Rosling just nails the philosophy here. You absolutely need the numbers to ground your worldview in reality, but you can't only look at the numbers. You have to remember the real human lives they represent. It's all about being data-driven, but humane too. Okay, but what if our ignorance isn't just an accident of our psychology? What if it's being engineered? This brings us to Lens 2, a radically different idea that suggests our flawed worldview isn't a bug, it's a feature of a system that's built for deliberate control. And this right here is the absolute core of that second framework. It's the idea that a small, hidden group has always shaped what the majority does by controlling the flow of information. Because if you can control what people see and believe, you can direct how they behave. From this perspective, our ignorance isn't natural. It's manufactured. According to this viewpoint, the main actor is what the source material calls the global cult. This is described as a secret network of individuals and organizations that effectively controls governments, media, and major institutions from the shadows. The purpose? to orchestrate world events and push a secret agenda for total centralized control. So how could a tiny group possibly control billions of people? Well, this source describes a pyramid of power. At the very top, a tiny inner circle sets the agenda. Their will is then imposed on the level right below them. And that level, well, they acquiesce, they go along with it. Then they impose it on the next level down. This just keeps happening, trickling all the way down until it reaches the public at the bottom, who are completely unaware that there's any agenda at all. All right, so we've got these two big kind of abstract frameworks. Let's really put them to the test. Let's take one huge concrete event that we all lived through, the COVID-19 pandemic, and see how each lens would explain. Through the Factfulness lens, you'd see the pandemic as a crisis of human psychology. Our fear instinct sent us into a panic. The crisis exposed huge system failures in our governments and healthcare, and our blame instinct had us searching for simple villains instead of complex causes. But the renegade lens, it sees a calculated catastrophe, a psychological operation, a psyop, designed to trigger what it calls the Great Reset, a complete overhaul of society. From that factfulness perspective, our fear was the real driver. The panic clouded our judgment, leading to flawed policies and overreactions that caused incredible amounts of secondary damage. The crisis was made so much worse by our own predictable and, let's be honest, irrational human behavior. In sharp contrast, the renegade lens points to quotes just like this one from the founder of the World Economic Forum and sees a smoking gun. The argument here is that the language proves the pandemic wasn't seen as just a tragedy to be managed, but as a perfect window of opportunity to be exploited for a pre-planned agenda. So here we are, with two profound, deeply conflicting ways to interpret the very same world. One says the distortion is caused by our internal psychology, and the other says it's caused by external manipulation. So what does each worldview really ask of you? Well, the Factfulness method says, trust the public data, but constantly manage your own internal biases. Look for the slow, quiet signs of progress and blame broken systems, not heroes or villains. The renegade method tells you to do the exact opposite. Distrust the official narrative, always search for hidden motives, connect the dots, and question all authority. So it all boils down to this, really. One view sees a complex, messy, but improvable system that's just being distorted by our own flawed minds. The other sees a meticulously planned conspiracy that's designed to manipulate those very same flaws in our minds. One urges you to look carefully at the public data. The other urges you to hunt for the hidden data. Ultimately, the lens you choose to look through is going to shape the reality you see. So the question is, when you look at the world, do you see a complicated system that we have to patiently work to understand? Or do you see a carefully constructed story that we have to fight to uncover? The answer you give to that question, it changes everything.